This is plainly gonna be a sharp video. Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop. Today we're going to be talking about plane irons, how to sharpen them. Now I did a video recently on how to sharpen chisels. I've done gouges, I've done V-carving tools, other things like that, but I've never done one on plane irons. And I figured, well, it's about time. So let's actually do this. Now I'm going to be using a bunch of different tools in here. I'll be leaving links to them down below, as well as a few other links to other sharpening videos and things like that that might interest you. So if you want to see those, definitely go take a look at those down below. But let's get to this. So the first thing I want to do is take the plane apart. So pull out the lever cap, pull out the iron, and disassemble it. Now I'm just going to loosen this a little bit. I don't want to take the screw all the way out. And then I'm going to slide the chip breaker back and then turn it 90 degrees and pull it out. And that way I don't slide it forward and nick the tip, because that will dull the tip. It's just a good practice to get into. Here when it's dull, it's not as much of an appointment, but here when it's dull, it's not as important, but when you're putting it back together and that's nice and sharp, you don't want to dull up the edge you just sharpened. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to come here onto the plate. Now there's a couple different methods of sharpening. Number one, if you have a big nick in it, you want to take that back to the stone or the grinder and clean it up. And you lay out some sandpaper on the floor and grind that down basically. Now there's several different types of sharpening, and if you are going to be having a nick in here or you need to do a lot of work on it, I like to take it to some sandpaper on the concrete and basically grind the edge back to where it needs to be. If you have a hand grinder or something like that in your shop, you can grind it on that. And then you come into the sharpening. The one thing I try to do is when I start to feel it getting dull, I stop planing. I don't use this anymore. I pull it out and I have this sitting on the bench, and I will strop down and re-hone that edge. And 30, 40, 50 strokes in the strop and it's ready to go again, as long as I stop and take care of it. But most of the time I am too busy for that. I'm just planing and planing, and I know it's getting dull, but I keep planing and it's getting duller and duller. And now it's to the point where it's too dull. I've got to sharpen it. So I'm going to take it back to these stones and redo that edge. One question I do get a lot is why I don't use a honing guide. And most of the time I'm just going to freehand it. Once you learn to freehand, it becomes so much faster. You just pop it out, you grind it down, you put it back in, and you're done. But every now and then I find that over time my hand starts to drop and the angle on it goes from a 30-degree angle to like a 25 and maybe even a little bit steeper than that. So I like to bring out the honing guide and spend a little bit of time taking the angle back to what it should be. And then after that I'm good for another 3, 4, 5 months. Just to basically set an exact angle on there. Occasionally I'll use a honing guide. But really, if you keep your mind on it, you don't have to do that. So I'm going to put a little bit of Windex on here. The Windex won't rust the plate because it evaporates too quickly. So then I can put it on here. And what I want to basically do is I want to lift it up until I feel that bevel. And where I hit that bevel, that's where I want to lock everything. I want to lock my wrist, I want to lock my elbow, my shoulder, and move my whole body and arm with it. And some people like to do it straight on like this, but that has a tendency to bevel the end and you get more of a convex shape than I like. I don't like going straight across the plate. I like to actually do it at a slight angle. So I'm just going to tip it at a slight angle like this and start grinding on it. And this should only take 30, 40 seconds or so. Maybe a minute if you have a lot of work to do. And then I'm going to clean it off, and I'm going to check the scratches and feel if there's any burr. Go back to it. Clean it off. There's a bit of a burr, needs a little bit more. And here I'm looking to see if I get scratch patterns running all the way across. And I'm missing a little bit right here. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but it's just not quite touching the tip right there. So I got to work on it a little longer. And there you go. See, after a little while, I have even scratch patterns running across at an angle all the way across here. and we're ready to move on. So the next thing I can do is come on here to the fine stone, and I'm basically going to do the exact same thing over again. This one doesn't take much time at all, and then I think I'm done. A little more. I'm also feeling for a burr on the back, and I've got that running all the way across. But you can see there's new scratch patterns running across. They're more like buffing marks than the scratches left from the coarser stone. And then of course, once that's done, on to the extra fine. And we can see that. And you'll see whole new scratch patterns, and it almost looks more like a slight buffing. You're not going to quite see mirroring yet. But you will see a little bit on there. Now you will notice I have a little bit of a convex grind on this, and that's just from doing it hand. That's not a problem, and I kind of like that. And then of course the last thing is coming onto the strop, and this is just a piece of horse butt. I've also used cow as well. Just looking for a hard leather, something that's got some rigidity to it. I'm using the coarse side, and I put in a buffing compound, a zinc oxide. I think I have a chrome oxide on here. And I'm going to then do the exact same thing, but rather than going back and forth, I'm just going to pull 30 or 40 strokes or so with a decent amount of pressure. And after that, we can lay it over, pull it on the back, and you can start to see those hairs coming off. I don't know if you can see those, but there's the burr. Oop, just falling off. The burr that was just rubbed off by the strop there. So I'll just work this back and forth a couple times until that burr completely falls off all the way across. And then we can give it a test. And then my favorite way of testing, yes, you can test it with a thumbnail, you can test it with the hair, you can test it with paper, but the easiest way for showing is that when you first pull it across in one stroke, it's going to clean all the hairs it touches. If it misses any hairs, then you got to go back and sharpen it a little bit. So I'm just going to set it in here, in one stroke, dry shaving, got a nice clean patch all the way across there. And then clean the next spot. If it's missing hairs, got to go back and do it again. But this is called hand tool pattern baldness, and I have a tendency to carry it a bit too far. Now I have a nice patch there. As much as shaving hairs is fun, now it's time to put this back together and give it a real test on wood. So I slide it in, keep it at 90 degrees, pull this back, rotate this around. And if I'm doing a really fine smoothing job, I want to move this chip breaker right down on the edge. I have an entire video on how to set up a hand plane for smoothing. But in this case, I don't want it to be a really fine smoothing plane, so I'm going to keep it back a 1/16 of an inch or so. I don't need it really close, just fairly close, adding a little bit of pressure to the front. And then I'm going to hold it in place, tighten down the screw a little bit, make sure it hasn't moved, and then we can tighten it down with the screwdriver. Then I can put it in the plane, making sure not to bang the tip against the plane itself. And when I put it in, I want to pull it back just a little bit. So I set this in, pull this back, lock it down, and then I can test it with my finger to make sure it's in the right place. Some people might like to look down it. I like to just feel it with my finger, and that lets me know which way it needs to rock a little bit. And I can adjust it to the right depth and angle. So then we can take it over to the wood and give it a test. So now we can bring it over to this. I know a lot of people like to test it in pine and poplar and softwoods, but this is rock maple. So you know if you get it good here, you can get it good just about anywhere. So we're going to put it on there and advance the blade until it engages, right like that. And then I can even it out a little bit until I get what I'm looking for. I love these curls. So just a hair deeper. Yeah, there we go. I hope that was as much fun for you as it was for me. I love a good sharp edge, and when you first get something cleaned up and the way it should be. It feels perfectly. That's heaven. So I'm loving it. I know I say that a lot, but I love a good sharp edge. If you do have any questions or comments or ideas, I'd love to hear them, and I do try to respond to all comments if at all possible. So yeah, go down below and let me know. I hope you have enjoyed this. It's been a fun one for me, and that's about it. So I do want to say thank you to the patrons on Patreon. I know I say this a lot, but you guys are the reason why I can keep doing this. I don't have any sponsors. I don't do anything where it's a paid promotion. It's all about you guys. So if you'd like to find out about Patreon or help out, you can do so right down over here. Also, if you want to subscribe or see some behind the scenes stuff, I also have a podcast we record every Thursday morning. So if you'd like to find out about that, I'll leave a link to it down below. Until next time, have a wonderful day.